Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, what we're going to be doing is my complete 2024 reading wrap up. So I'm going to be telling you what my favourite book was, my least favourite book, my favourite series I read last year, a book I thought was overhyped, a book I thought was underhyped, and a new favourite author I discovered in 2024. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get into the video. So I think I'm going to start with my favourite book. So my favourite book for the entirety of 2024 was definitely this one, and it is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And this is a historical fiction book, and it's loosely based on Shakespeare and his family life and his children and how he met his wife and things like that. And I absolutely love this. I am a massive theatre fan anyway. I studied drama at uni, so I did have an interest in Shakespeare before I went into this, which probably helped. And I also love historical fiction, but this book was just so good, and you don't see a lot of hype about this around online, which I think is a shame because it is, like I say, such a good book. And like I said before, it basically follows Shakespeare's family and it switches between time zones. So you sort of see when he meets his wife and how their relationship develops. And it also shows you his family life and his children, and also how his family go through the grief of losing one of their children. It is really sad at times. It's an emotional read, but it was just so good. And it gripped me from start to finish, and I loved it so much. It was also set partially in Stratford upon Avon, which is a place I have personally visited, which also helped, I think, because I love the place it was set in anyway. And it basically taps into how the play Hamlet came to be, if that makes sense. But it is so good. If you have any interest in Shakespeare plays, if you have any interest in historical fiction, I do definitely recommend this book because it is absolutely amazing. And it was a 5 out of 5 stars for me, and I absolutely loved it. So, this was my favourite book of 2024. My least favourite book of last year was one I no longer own because I donated it to a charity shop because I thought that if I didn't like it, I weren't going to read it again and somebody else might enjoy it. So why not give them the opportunity to enjoy it? So I don't have the physical copy with me, but I will put a photo of the cover probably here somewhere. And my least favourite book of 2024 was The Kissing Booth by Beth Reekles. It was a YA romance, and it sort of bases on the main character, who I can't remember the name of, but she's going through school and she fancies this boy, and they set up a kissing booth as part of the school carnival, I think, and they get into a relationship, and it's basically about that. But like I say, it just didn't do a lot for me, to be honest. I found it fell flat in places. I found it quite boring, and it's a shame because I know it is a very well loved book, but it just weren't for me, unfortunately. And that's why I donated it, because I thought maybe I'm not the target audience, maybe it is for younger readers, and hopefully that then went to somebody that will now love that book and cherish it for the rest of their lives. But it's not something I'm going to read again. But yeah, that was my least favourite book of the year. There's not really a lot else I can say on it, to be honest, because I don't really remember a lot about it because I read it at the start of the year and I didn't really enjoy it, so it's not really stayed in my head, if that makes sense. But yeah, anyway, moving on. So, the next thing I want to talk about is a book I thought was really underhyped this year. So, a book that I haven't seen a lot about, but I read and I absolutely loved it. And that book was Elsewhere by Gabrielle Zevin. And it is a YA, and it basically follows the main character Liz. I just had to check what her name was then. But she gets killed in a car accident and she goes to this place called Elsewhere, and you age backwards, if that makes sense. And you live your life backwards until you are a baby again, and then you get sent back out into the world. And she's only 16 in this book, so she's just learning to drive, and she's just sort of coming into adulthood when it happens to her. So it's all about her and how she navigates the fact that she's never going to get older. She's never going to do all the things she hoped she would do. And it basically talks about how she misses her friends back home and how she misses her family and how she sort of gets over all that and forges a new life for herself, which I think is a really good concept for a book. And it's hard to explain without you actually knowing what happens, if that makes sense, but it's just such a good idea for a storyline, and I really enjoyed it. It's just such a good book, and this was another one of my top reads for last year. So if you are looking for something a bit shorter, because it's not a very chunky book, if you are looking for something a bit easier to read with a good plot and a good storyline, this might be for you, because it is so good, and I do recommend this a lot now that I've read it. So definitely pick this one up. It is really good. So that's a book I thought was underhyped last year. A book I thought was overhyped is this one, and I know this book is well loved. I know it is well loved. It is everywhere, but I just don't understand it somehow. And I will talk about my reasons in a moment, so please just give me a chance. It is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. This book gets so much hype online, and it just fell a bit flat for me. I really struggled to get through it. It was only the last 100 pages or so that it really picked up. I did end up persevering with the series, and like I say, it does get a lot of love online, so I stuck with it. And as the books went on, they did get a lot better, and the last one, A Court of Silver Flame, ended up being my favourite book in the whole series. That was a really good one. But this specific one, I just didn't get why it gets so much hype, to be honest. I am reading Throne of Glass at the moment, and I have noticed with Sarah J Maas series that the start tends to be a bit slow, if that makes sense. Throne of Glass was the same. The start was quite slow. I've just finished Queen of Shadows, and that's the first book I really cared what happened, if that makes sense. That's the first one that's really gripped my attention, and it's 5 books in, so it is a bit of a task to get to the good books, if that makes sense. But they are picking up now. And anyway, enough on that tangent. But this book, I just found fell a bit flat. Like I say, I found it boring in places. It took a lot to get into, and I thought it was a shame because it does get a lot of hype, and I really wanted to love it. But I don't think that helped either, because there's such a hype around it that I was expecting it to be a 5-star read from the offset, and I'd never look back, if that makes sense. But it just didn't live up to the hype for me, unfortunately. And like I say, I know it is so many people's favourite series, but I just think there are better fantasy series out there. If this is your favourite book, I'm so sorry, but that's just my personal opinion. And reading is subjective, and we all like what we like. And unfortunately, this one just wasn't one of my favourites. Anyway, moving on. So that was a book I thought was overhyped. Now moving on to the next category, which is a new favourite author I discovered in 2024. And they are Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Again, this series was my favourite series I read this year. I'd never read anything else of hers before, so I was pleasantly surprised when I picked this up, and it was as good as I expected it to be, if that makes sense. But I definitely want to read more Jennifer Lynn Barnes stuff this year. The Natural series, I think, is on Kindle Unlimited, so I'll read that soon. But yeah, I picked this book up at the start of December just because I wanted something fast paced to read. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but it was an absolutely amazing series. It was the last series I read of 2024 and ended up being my favourite. So Jennifer Lynn Barnes deserves the title for this one, I think. And I'm really excited to read more of her stuff this year. So she was my new favourite author of last year. But I also want to give an honourable mention to Gabrielle Zevin, because I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow in 2023, I think, and I did not get on with that book at all. It was another one that was really hyped online, and I was expecting to love it, and I just didn't. And it weren't my favourite book, so I was a bit apprehensive to pick any more books up by Gabrielle Zevin, if that makes sense. But then I went into the works and did a bit of book shopping, as I do, and I picked up Memoirs of a Teenage Amnesiac and this one, and I absolutely loved both of them. I've read 3 more Gabrielle Zevin books last year, so I read this one, Memoirs of a Teenage Amnesiac, and The Storied Life of AJ Fikry, and I loved all 3 of them. So I'm just going to put it down to the fact that Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow just weren't a book for me. And I am going to be looking more into Gabrielle Zevin books this year, because I did really enjoy the 3 I read last year. So she deserves an honourable mention too. But yeah, I think that's everything. I have seen a few of these videos floating about already, and I did get inspiration from different ones. But they're the questions I thought I'd answer for you. So that is the end of my video today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please like, comment and subscribe underneath, and I will see you all again next week.